start? Yes, it did. It started. Oh, hi. Yes, I have a bonnet. I have my bonnet. Hi. It's 2 o'clock because it's Easter. It's holiday hours. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. That it's 2 o'clock. It's holiday hours, so that we start at 2. Give everybody a chance to finish finding their eggs and their chocolate. But I have a chocolate bunny. I have a couple chocolate bunnies. I have Russell Stover marshmallow eggs. I have this is called Nibbles Nibbles the chocolate bunny. And he has a giant carrot. I have carrots in my ears. And it's Easter, and I have a basket of I managed to snag some stuff the other day, and I got these are Peeps root beer float flavor. I have no idea if they're any good. I bought them. I saw them like 2 weeks ago at the store, and I was like, I could just get them. Like, I was in a panic Easter buying mode, and I bought root beer flavored Peeps. They're probably terrible. Hi, happy Easter, happy Passover, happy everything. I have better lighting. I just, it's because it's murky and cold and miserable again. So I have a lamp, and I feel so much better already. So we're reading Little House on the Prairie again because we did it. We got through Little House in the Big Woods, and Dean Almanzo did Farmer Boy, and now I'm going to do Little House on the Prairie. This is where they're going across to Kansas, out to Indian territory. They're going into the West, and many terrible, terrible things happen to the Ingalls family. They almost ran. Currently, the dog, Jack the dog, is missing and presumed dead because it's not a happy story. There you go. So this is what we're going to do, is we're going to read this and eat a chocolate bunny. Okay? It's camp on the high prairie. Pa made camp as usual. First, he unhitched and unharnessed Pet and Patty, and he put them on their picket lines. Picket lines were long ropes fastened to iron pegs driven into the ground. The pegs were called picket pins. When horses were on picket lines, they could eat all the grass that the long ropes would let them reach. But when Pet and Patty were put on them, the first thing they did was to lie down and roll back and forth and over. They rolled till the feeling of the harnesses was all gone from their backs. So this is what horses do. I was just doing that myself, actually. I get, sore back. I got the, yoga balls. It's the same thing. They just roll around on the floor. When Pat and Patty were rolling, Pa pulled all the grass from a large round space of ground. There was old dead grass at the roots of the green grass, and Pa would take no chance of setting the prairie on fire because every other terrible thing had just happened. We really don't want a prairie fire on top of that, because there you go. If fire once started in that dry undergrass, it would sweep the whole country bare and black. Pa said, best be on the safe side. It saves trouble in the end. And that is true, because a prairie fire, you light the grass on a dry prairie, you have a prairie fire. It's like a tornado of flame, and there's nothing you can do, and it's terrifying. When the space was clear of grass, Pa laid a handful of dry grass in its center. From the creek bottoms, he brought an armful of twigs and dead wood. He laid small twigs and larger twigs than the wood on the handful of dry grass, and he lighted the grass. The fire crackled merrily inside the ring of bare ground that it couldn't get out of. Then Pa brought water from the creek, while Mary and Laura helped Ma get supper. I might have gotten the water before I lit the fire, but coffee! Yay! Mom measured coffee beans into the coffee mill, and Mary ground them. Fresh ground coffee. Okay, they didn't have espresso machine, but they did have a little thing with the ground coffee. Where's my bottle? It's so bright in here, I forgot I put my man. It's the pink one for Easter. Did I mention it's the pink one for Easter? There we go. Okay, it's lovely. Oh, that's so much better. I love that. Okay. Laura filled the coffee pot with the water that Pa brought, and Ma set the pot on the coals. She set the iron bake oven in the coals, too. While it heated, she mixed cornmeal and salt with water and patted it into little cakes. She greased the bake oven with a pork rind. Okay, yeah, it would work. I think it would work. Laid the cornmeal cakes in it and put on its iron cover. Then Pa raked more coals over the cover while Ma sliced fat salt pork. Salt! She fried the slices in the iron spider. What, you may well ask, is an iron spider? If you're doing camping cooking, or you lived in the 1800s, you know you have your like Dutch oven kind of thing for baking on a fire, but you have a spider. The spider had short legs to stand on in the coals, and that was why it was called a spider. If it had had no legs, it would have been only a frying pan. So it's like a cast iron thing, a frying pan, but it has legs, so you can plonk it right in the fire and use it as a cooking surface. And it's very clever. The coffee boiled, the cakes baked, the meat fried, and they all smelled so good that Laura grew hungrier and hungrier. Pa set the wagon seat near the fire. He and Ma sat on it. Mary and Laura sat on the wagon tongue, the thing that sticks out of the wagon. Each of them had a tin plate and a steel knife and a steel fork with white bone handles. Ma had a tin cup, and Pa had a tin cup, and baby Carrie had a little one all her own, but Mary and Laura had to share their tin cup. Have their own tin cup. I'm so poor, I don't even have my own tin cup. They drank water. They could not drink coffee until they grew up. Well, you know, that's the first reasonable thing I've heard these people do, and sensibly. Now, you know, on the set, when we were filming this, we were terrible. We drank coffee. Hold on, I'm going to eat a bunny or some chocolate. I just bit the ear off a chocolate bunny, and I liked it. When we were filming this, there was so much coffee. I was a teenager, but I was still too young, really, but I was drinking massive amounts of coffee. Melissa Gilbert, we drank coffee, and we were so awful. Robin and Rachel, little darling girls who played baby Carrie, were much too young to drink coffee, kept wanting coffee, and we would make them little cups with like lots and lots of milk and sugar and a little bit of coffee. But technically, yeah, we were kind of giving coffee to 8-year-olds, and it was terrible. There you go. What are you going to do? But luckily, the real Laura and Mary had the good sense to not drink coffee as children, because it's not good for you. While they were eating supper, the purple shadows closed around the campfire. The vast prairie was dark and still. Only the wind moved stealthily through the grass, and the large, low stars hung glittering from the great sky. The campfire was cozy in the big, chill darkness. The slices of pork were crisp and fat. Ooh, the corn cakes were good. Now that sounds good, a little cornbread and bacon there. In the dark, beyond the wagon, Pet and Patty were eating too. They bit off bites of grass with their sharply crunching sounds. "We'll camp here a day or two," said Pa. "Maybe we'll stay here. There's good land, timber in the bottoms, plenty of game, everything a man could want. What do you say, Caroline?" Now, again, he's just like, we could move, we could live here. He's very fluid with the finding a homestead thing. "Well, we might go farther and fare worse," Ma replied. True. "Anyway, I'll look around tomorrow," Pa said. "I'll take my gun and get us some good fresh meat." He lighted his pipe with a hot coal and stretched out his legs comfortably. The warm brown smell of tobacco smoke mixed with the warmth of the fire. Mary yawned and slid off the wagon tongue to sit on the grass. Laura yawned too. Ma quickly washed the tin plates, the tin cups, the knives and forks. She washed the bake oven and the spider and rinsed the dishcloth. That's a lot of work. You got to wash the thing and the cast iron and then it's up. For an instant, she was still and listening to the long, wailing howl from the dark prairie. Yikes. They all knew what it was. But that sound always ran cold up Laura's backbone and crinkled over the back of her head. Ma shook the dishcloth, and then she walked into the dark and spread the cloth on the tall grass to dry. When she came back, Pa said, "Wolves!" It's a totally ordinary thing. "Wolves! Half a mile away, I judge. Well, where there's deer, there will be wolves. I wish—" He didn't say what he wished, but Laura knew. He wished Jack were there. When wolves howled in the big woods, Laura had always known that Jack would not let them hurt her. A lump swelled hard in her throat, and her nose smarted. She winked fast and did not cry. That wolf, or perhaps another wolf, howled again. "Bedtime for little girls," Ma said cheerfully, as the wolves that are going to eat them are right next door. Ma got up and turned around. Mary got up and turned around so that Ma could unbutton her. But Laura jumped up and stood still. She saw something. Deep in the dark, beyond the firelight, 2 green lights were shining near the ground. They were eyes. Ah! Cold ran up Laura's backbone. Her scalp crinkled. Her hair stood up. The green lights moved. One winked out, the other winked out, and then both shone steadily. Coming nearer. Shining dark green eyes in the dark. Okay, and there's howling wolves. I'm scared. Very rapidly, they were coming nearer. Look, Pa, look, Laura said. A wolf. Pa did not seem to move quickly, but he did. In an instant, he took his gun out of the wagon and was ready to fire at those green eyes. The eyes stopped coming. They were still in the dark, looking at him. Can't be a wolf, unless it's a mad wolf, Pa said. Oh, great. So, it's not bad enough that you could be attacked by wolves. You could get attacked by rabid mad wolves. Oh, how nice. It can't be a wolf unless it's a mad wolf. Ma lifted Mary into the wagon. And it's not that, said Pa. Listen to the horses. Pet and Patty were still biting off bits of grass. A lynx, said Ma. A lynx. There's also lynx there. Or a coyote. Pa picked up a stick of wood. He shouted and threw it. The green eyes went close to the ground, as if the animal crouched to spring. Pa held the gun ready. The creature did not move. Don't, Charles, Ma said, but Pa slowly walked toward those eyes. And slowly, along the ground, the eyes crawled toward him. Laura could see the animal in the edge of the dark. It was a tawny animal and brindled. Then Pa shouted, and Laura screamed. The next thing she knew, she was trying to hug a jumping, panting, wriggling Jack, who lapped her face and hands with his warm, wet tongue. She couldn't hold him. He leaped and wriggled from her to Pa, to Ma, and back to her again. Well, I'm beat, Pa said. So am I, said Ma. But did you have to wake the baby? She rocked Carrie in her arms, hushing her. Jack was perfectly well, but soon he lay down close to Laura and sighed a long sigh. Poor thing. His eyes were red with tiredness, and all the under part of him was caked with mud. Ma gave him a cornmeal cake, and he licked it and wagged politely, but he could not eat. He was too tired. Dog, too tired to eat. But he's alive! Jack's alive! Yay, Jack's alive. He didn't drown under river. We all thought Jack was dead for a whole chapter there. But he's alive. Thank heavens. No telling how long he kept swimming, Pa said, nor how far he was carried downstream before he landed. And when at last he reached them, Laura called him a wolf, and Pa threatened to shoot him. This dog cannot catch a break. But Jack knew they didn't mean it. Laura asked him, You know we didn't mean it, didn't you, Jack? Jack wagged a stump of a tail. He knew. It was past bedtime. Pa chained Pet and Patty to the feed box at the back of the wagon and fed them their corn. Carrie slept again, and Ma helped Mary and Laura undress. She put their long nightgowns over their heads while they stuck their arms into the sleeve. Hard to do. They buttoned the neck bands themselves and tied the strings of their nightcaps underneath their chins. Bonnety nightcaps, and so cute. Under the wagon, Jack wearily turned around 3 times and lay down to sleep. Even on the prairie in the 1800s, the dogs turn around 3 times before they get bed. In the wagon, Laura and Mary said their prayers and crawled into their little bed. Ma kissed them good night. On the other side of the canvas, Pet and Patty were eating their corn. When Patty whooshed into the feed box, the whoosh was right at Laura's ear. There were little scurrying sounds in the grass. In the trees by the creek, an owl called, Ooh, ooh. Farther away, another owl answered, Ooh, ooh. Far away on the prairie, the wolves howled. And under the wagon, Jack growled low in his chest. In the wagon, everything was safe and snug. Thickly, in front of the open wagon top, hung the large glittering stars. Pa could reach them, Laura thought. She wished he would pick the largest one from the thread on which it hung from the sky and give it to her. She was wide awake. She was not sleepy at all, but suddenly she was very much surprised. The large star winked at her. Then she was waking up next morning. The star twinkled, and, it may a planet. It may have been a planet. It may have been just an atmospheric thing with the star winks. It may have been a comet. It was not a satellite. Now, here in Los Angeles, we go, oh, the stars are twinkling. Oh, wait, it's a helicopter. It's moving. But no, this was a star that twinkled, which is really cool. But that's when, in the 1870s, where there was no light pollution, no towns. I'm totally eating this rabbit. The stars, it was just all stars. I mean, it was lit. You would have the light of the moon and the stars. It was amazing. Who just said, Michael Landon was a large glittery star? Yes, Michael Landon was a large glittery star. Chapter 4, Prairie Day. Prairie Night, Prairie Day. And also, yay, Jack's alive. So we need to read another chapter where Jack is not dead or missing, because that will make us feel better. Soft wickerings were close to Laura's ear, and grain rattled into the feed box. Horses are eating again. Pa was giving Pet and Patty their breakfast. Bat, Pet, don't be greedy, he said. You know it's Patty's turn. Horses are hungry. Pet stamped her foot and nickered. Horses are like, Rrr! Now, Patty, keep your own end of the box, said Pa. This is for Pet. And then a little squeal from Patty. Nee! Ha, got nipped, didn't you, Pa said. Serve you right. I told you to eat your own corn. He's talking to the horses like we talk to our cats or dogs. Now, you eat your little dash. No, you leave that. You leave that for the other puppy. He's talking to the little dog, little horsies. Mary and Laura looked at each other and laughed. They could smell bacon and coffee and hear pancakes sizzling, and they scrambled out of bed. Pancakes. Mary could dress herself, all but the middle button. Laura buttoned that one for her, and then Mary buttoned Laura all the way up the back. Imagine these dresses, and they're out in the middle of nowhere, like bivouacking in the dirt on the prairie, and they're still wearing these fancy dresses that button all the way up the back. How they stand it. They washed their hands and faces in the tin wash basin on the wagon step. They stayed very clean. We have this idea of people in the 1800s like they never bathed or they bathed every Saturday night. They do a lot of washing. They're always washing their hands and face. They're doing like a quick bath with a cloth with a basin. Sometimes they'll stand in the basin, pour the water ahead, have like a quick little shower. So they do the big bath on Saturday, but they were constantly washing. They were either down at the creek or they had a basin or something. So they weren't actually filthy all the time. Ma combed every snarl out of their hair while Pa brought fresh water from the creek. Then they sat on the clean grass and ate pancakes and bacon and molasses from the tin plates in their laps. Yum! All around them, shadows were moving over the waving grasses while the sun rose. Meadowlarks were springing straight up from the billows of grass into the high, clear sky, singing as they went. Small pearly clouds drifted in the immense blueness overhead. In all the weed tops, tiny birds were swinging and singing in tiny voices. Pa said they were dickcissels. What? That's what it said. Dickcissels. Dickcissel. I am not a bird watcher, and I live in California where we don't have Kansas dickcissels, whatever these are. So I'm only up on certain birds. I do not know what a dickcissel is, but Laura then says, Dicky, Dicky! Laura called back to them, Dicky bird. We have all heard of the Dicky bird. In fact, even on the show, when Laura's learning to read, she has a book, Dicky Bird Land. And so Dicky birds are a big thing with Laura. And these, a dickcissel is a Dicky bird, which I guess goes, Dicky, Dicky! Sure. Eat your breakfast, Laura, Ma said. You must mind your manners, even if we are 100 miles from anywhere. Pa said mildly, It's only 40 miles to Independence, Caroline, and no doubt there's a neighbor or so nearer than that. Now, 40 miles is pretty far for your neighbors, but remember, no car. Like, you could drive 40 miles. That's like days. Instead of walking. Pa said, 40 miles. 40 miles? 40 miles then, Ma agreed. But whether or no, she didn't say whether or not, whether or no, it isn't good manners to sing at table. Or when you're eating, she added, because there was no table. Right? Not at the table, at table. Whether or no, it is not good manners to sing at table. That's how you say things. And if there's no table, and you're sitting in the dirt with a blanket and a tin cup, still, you have to behave yourself. There was only the enormous empty prairie, with grasses blowing and waves of light and shadow across it, and the great blue sky above it, and birds flying up from it and singing with joy because the sun was rising. And on the whole enormous prairie, there was no sign that any other human being had ever been there. It's wilderness. In all that space of land and sky stood the lonely small covered wagon, and close to it sat Pa and Ma and Laura and Mary and baby Carrie, eating their breakfast. The mustangs munched their corn, and Jack sat still, trying hard not to beg. Laura was not allowed to feed him while she ate, but she saved bits for him. And Ma made a big pancake for him, and of the last of the batter. Okay, well, since they abandoned him and he almost drowned and almost died crossing country to rejoin them, she did have the decency to make the dog a pancake. I would give the dog like a hunk of bacon after all that, good God. Rabbits were everywhere in the grass. Rabbits! Wait, rabbits were everywhere in the grass. And thousands of prairie chickens. But Jack could not hunt his breakfast that day. Pa was going hunting, and Jack must guard the camp. First, Pa put Pet and Patty on their picket lines. The picket lines. Then he took the wooden tub from the side of the wagon and filled it with water from the creek. Ma was going to do the washing. Then Pa stuck his sharp hatchet in his belt. He hung his powder horn beside the hatchet. He put the patch box and the bullet pouch in his pocket, and he took his gun on his arm. Now, if you remember, they explained all of these tools in Big Woods, because Pa was constantly hunting. And he talked about how you had the patch box was like the little wads you put in the gun, and then the bullets, you had the wads and the gunpowder, you had the powder and the wad and the ammo, and how each shot you had to put in powder, put in the wad, put in the bullet, and then shoot. And it's how he kept all of this equipment at the ready with the gun loaded. And he went into great detail about that. So now he's like, oh yeah, the patch box. We all know about the patch box. Gotta have your patch box ready. Keep your powder dry. He said to Ma, I now ate so much chocolate. I'm gagging chocolate and milk. Charming. He said to Ma, take your time, Caroline. We won't move the wagon till we want to. We've got all the time there is. Charles. He went away. For a little while, they could see the upper part of him above the tall grasses, going away and growing smaller. Then he went out of sight, and the prairie was empty. Mary and Laura washed the dishes while Ma made the beds in the wagon. They put the clean dishes neatly in their box. They picked up every scattered twig and put it in the fire. They stacked the wood against the wagon wheel. Then everything about the camp was tidy. They're 100 miles from anywhere. They're barely surviving, and yet the women are doing housework. And here they are. They're cleaning. They're tidying. They're doing dishes. There's no house, but they're doing housework. She's making beds, and they're doing dishes. I saw this once. I haven't really done a lot of camping. I'm very much a city person, but a long time ago, my folks and I went to this thing like Camp Land, and they had little campers, and there were these people who had a camper next door, and it was in the middle of nowhere, and it was lovely, and there was a beach, there was a little creek, and it was the country, and people had little campers, and it was great, and kids were playing, and you could do sort of camping stuff, but the people who had a little mobile home thing next to us, the father and the kids went fishing, and the mother was in the camper vacuuming on a Saturday morning in the forest, and she was vacuuming, and my father was laughing hysterically, going, why would you do housework? You're camping. Stop doing housework. It's like you're crazy. So they cleaned in the middle of nowhere. Ma brought the wooden pannikin of soft soap from the wagon. She kilted up her skirts Woo! And rolled up her sleeves. You see, kilted up her skirts. This is an expression you don't know. Because she had those huge, the big skirts with the petticoats. You saw them do this on the show. When Ma would like play baseball and they'd be sporty, she'd pull the skirts and like tuck them into the waistband. You pull them up, kilting your skirts, and then it's sort of shorter so you can get around. She kilted up her skirts and rolled up her sleeves. And she knelt by the tub on the grass. She washed sheets and pillowcases and white underthings, and she washed dresses and shirts, and she rinsed them in clear water and spread them on the clean grass to dry in the sun. So like I said, nobody was dirty on the prairie. They were bathing, they were doing laundry, they were actually pretty clean. Mary and Laura were exploring. They must not go far from the wagon, but it was fun to run through the tall grass in the sunshine and wind. Huge rabbits bounded away before them. Birds fluttered up and settled again. The tiny dicky birds were everywhere, dicky, and their tiny nests were in the tall weeds, and everywhere were little brown striped gophers. I don't have a gopher. I have no chocolate gophers to make gopher. No. I love gophers. These little creatures look soft as velvet. Yeah, gophers are cool. They had bright round eyes and crinkling noses and wee paws. The little wee paws of the gophers. They popped out of the holes in the ground and stood up to look at Mary and Laura. Their hind legs folded under their haunches and their little paws folded tight to their chests, and they looked exactly like little bits of dead wood sticking out of the ground. Only their bright eyes glittered. Mary and Laura wanted to catch one to take to Ma, like a whack-a-mole. Again and again they almost had one. The gopher would stand perfectly still until you were sure you had him this time. Then just as you touched him, he wasn't there. There was only his round hole in the ground. So here is Mary, I think it's Mary, playing whack-a-mole with the actual gophers. They're just disappearing because they're very cute. It's like that, what was that show with the little marmots or whatever, the little things that did hiding, and they disappear in the ground because they look up at the sky, all the little gophers and the little bull, they all look at, and then they go, whoo, yeah, okay, marmoset banner or whatever that was. Laura ran and couldn't catch one. Mary sat perfectly still beside a hole, waiting for one to come up, and just beyond her reach, gophers scampered merrily, and gophers sat up and looked at her. But not one ever came out of that hole. And see, here she is guarding. She's trying to catch a gopher, but look at the gophers are like behind her. You cannot catch gophers. This can't be done. Once a shadow floated across the grass, and every gopher vanished. Meerkats. It's like Meerkat Manor, when the hawks would come and the meerkats would go, whoop! Every gopher vanished. They knew a hawk was sailing overhead. It was so close that Laura saw its cruel round eye turn downward to look at her. She saw its sharp beak and its savage claws curled, ready to pounce. But the hawk saw nothing but Laura and Mary, and round empty holes in the ground, it sailed away, looking somewhere else for its dinner. You know, if it was a little bigger, it would totally, probably get baby Carrie. They're huge, those things, out on the prairie. Then all the little gophers came up again. It was nearly noon then. The sun was almost overhead, so Laura and Mary picked flowers from the weeds, and they took the flowers to Ma instead of a gopher. I would imagine that Ma really appreciated that they brought her flowers and not a smelly old gopher. I would not have thought that was cool. I should eat a peep. Yes, I should try the root beer peeps. Ma was folding the dry clothes. The little panties and petticoats were whiter than snow, warm from the sun and smelling like the grass. Now, it's not like, remember Almanza's family? Everything was made of wool. Because they had that sheep empire, and they had the wool underwear and the thick wool underwear. They had nice little cloth cotton garments, which is, I think a great improvement. I'm glad, because I would not want to wear itchy wool underwear. Should I eat I'm going to eat a root beer float peep at some point, because I should try them. Lovely, lovely, smelling like the grass. Ma laid them in the wagon, and she took the flowers. She admired equally the flowers that Laura gave her and the flowers Mary gave her, and she put them together in a tin cup full of water. Aww. She set them on the wagon step to make the camp pretty. Then she split 2 cold corn cakes and spread them with molasses. She gave one to Mary and one to Laura. That was their dinner, and it was very good. Cornbread and molasses. That actually sounds pretty good. Where is a papoose, Ma? Laura asked. Don't speak with your mouth full, Laura, said Ma. So Laura chewed and swallowed, and she said, I want to see a papoose. Hi, kitty. Mercy on us, Ma said. Whatever makes you want to see Indians, we will see enough of them. More than we want to, I wouldn't wonder. They wouldn't hurt us, would they? Mary asked. Mary was always good. She never spoke with her mouth full. No, Ma said. Don't get such an idea into your head. Ma is not a fan, okay, of Indians. Why don't you like Indians, Ma? Laura asked, and she caught a drip of molasses with her tongue. I just don't like them, and don't lick your fingers, Laura, said Ma. But this is Indian country, isn't it? Laura said. What did we come to their country for if you don't like them? Okay, now, there has been much discussion about Laura Ingalls' books and the fact that they moved into what was Native American territory and had been treated to them and was being stolen back at that time, and it was very controversial. And people have said, well, wait a minute, they kept taking the land, and their treatment of Indians, and saying that Laura Ingalls, as if Laura Ingalls Wilder herself, perhaps bore animosity towards Native Americans. However, as you notice here, Ma, yeah, she flat out says, I hate Native Americans, I hate Indians. Ma is quite clear. Laura is arguing with her. Now remember, we have repeatedly in these books heard about children aren't supposed to talk back. A child is never supposed to contradict their mother. And here is Laura, flat out, at like, what is she, 8? Contradicting her mother to her face and being impertinent, as they would say in the 1870s. Why did we come to their country for if you don't like them? This is their country. Laura is saying it is in fact their land, and why are we here? If you hate them so much, why are we here? That is rather pointed in here, that Laura very, very, very much has a different opinion about the Native American situation than her mother. She thinks her mother is like wrong, and that maybe they should let the Native Americans have their land. Oh, there's a thought. Hello. Ma said she didn't know whether this was Indian country or not. She didn't know where the Kansas line was. Which, I mean, how would they know? They didn't have a compass, no map. But whether or no, the Indians would not be here long. Pa had word from a man in Washington that the Indian Territory would be open to settlement soon. It might already be open to settlement. They could not know because Washington was so far away. So they're not getting phone calls or like telegrams or whatnot, and they've got no map, but they're being told, it's fine. And this, unfortunately, in the 1870s was a thing that our government did, where they told the Indians, yes, here's a treaty, you have this chunk, this part of Kansas, totally yours, it's cool, live here, we're not going to bother you anymore. And then they turned around and told the settlers, it's fine. Yeah, go move there. Oh, no, there's no Indians. It's totally, we bought it. It's fine. Take it. And then, of course, bloodshed and chaos ensued. And it got really ugly, and the government took their land some more. So, so the Ingalls were kind of mere pawns in a horrible, evil plot to steal land. Then Ma took the Satiron, it's either the Satiron or the Satiron, because I don't know what this is. Satiron out of the wagon and heated it by the fire. So this is another thing. Oh, it's for iron. It's an iron that we would have plug in. She has the Satiron out of the wagon and heated it by the fire. She sprinkled a dress for Mary and a dress for Laura and a little dress for baby Carrie and her own sprigged calico. And she spread a blanket and a sheet on the wagon seat, and she ironed the dresses. You know, when you don't have an ironing board, you put a big thick towel on a table, and that's what she did. She put some blankets on the wagon seat and ironed the clothes. And this is how she actually literally heated it up in a fire. So, yes. So all the historian people go, oh, yes, the Satiron. Duh, of course, we know about this. See, Sarah, older definition meaning... Sarah, who knows these things. Sad is used in an older definition meaning heavy. Yes, the sad iron, the heavy iron. Okay, all makes sense now. See, 1870s. I'm getting caught up on my 1870s talk here. Baby Carrie slept in the wagon. Laura, Baby Carrie sleeps through most of this book. Sorry, she has like nothing to do. Baby Carrie just sleeps. Laura and Mary and Jack lay on the shady grass beside it, because now the sunshine was hot. Jack's mouth was open, and his red tongue hung out. His eyes blinked sleepily. Poor doggy. Ma hummed softly to herself, while the iron smoothed all the wrinkles out of the little dresses. All around them, to the very edge of the world, there was nothing but grasses waving in the wind. Far overhead, a few white puffs of cloud sailed in the thin blue air. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous place. Beautiful, beautiful. Have you been to Kansas? I haven't been. I've been to Nebraska, and I've been to Kansas, and it is. It's like flat and puffy clouds. Gorgeous. Laura was very happy. The wind sang a low, rustling song in the grass. Grasshoppers, rasping, quivered up from all the immense prairie. A buzzing came faintly from all the trees in the creek bottoms, but all these sounds made a great, warm, happy silence. Laura had never seen a place she liked so much as this place. Oh, here's Ma working away. Ma's ironing. There she is. That's the sad iron, the heavy iron from the fire. There it is. Iron the clothes. She didn't know she had gone to sleep until she woke up. Jack was on his feet, wagging his stump tail. The sun was low, and Pa was coming across the prairie. Laura jumped up and ran, and his long shadow stretched to meet her in the waving grasses. He held up the game in his hand for her to see. He had a rabbit. And the largest rabbit she had ever seen. Wow, and two plump prairie hens. Oh, and two plump prairie hens. Laura jumped up and down and clapped her hands and squealed. Then she caught hold of his other sleeve and hippity-hopped through the tall grasses behind him, like a little bunny. This country's cram-jammed with game, he told her. I saw 50 deer if I saw one, and antelope, squirrels, rabbits, birds of all kinds. The creek's full of fish, he said to Ma. I tell you, Caroline, there's everything we want here. We can live like kings. That was a wonderful supper. They sat by the campfire and ate the tender, savory, flavory meat till they could eat no more. Back then you stuffed yourself. You didn't know when you were going to eat again. So you went, rabbit. And they did. When at last Laura set down her plate, she sighed with contentment. She didn't want anything more in the world. The last color was fading from the enormous sky, and all the level land was shadowy. The warmth of the fire was pleasant because the night wind was cool. Phoebe birds called sadly from the woods down by the creek, and I another bird that I'd never heard of. For a little while, a mockingbird sang. Then the stars came out, and the birds were still. Softly, Pa's fiddle sang in the starlight. Sometimes he sang a little, and sometimes the fiddle sang along. Sweet and thin and far away, the fiddle went on singing. Okay, and let's hope that this song, nobody dies, that he's not singing about someone in their tomb or saying terrible things about African Americans or Indians. Oh, no, it's a nice song. Nobody dies. It's a good song. Okay. None knew thee but to love thee, thou dear one of my heart. Oh, that's nice. It's a nice love song. The large, bright stars hung down from the sky. Lower and lower they came, quivering with music. Laura gasped, and Ma came quickly. What is it, Laura? She asked, and Laura whispered, the stars were singing. You've been asleep, Ma said. It's only the fiddle, and it's time little girls were in bed. She undressed Laura in the firelight and put on her nightgown and tied her nightcap and tucked her into bed. But the fiddle was still singing in the starlight. The night was full of music, and Laura was sure that part of it came from the great bright stars swinging so low above the prairie. Oh, it's romantic. See, that's the stuff in the Bible. Some of you have gone online and seen stuff like Melissa Gilbert's screen test when things are like sealed for your protection. You've seen the thing with like Melissa's screen test. where she and Michael Landon are by the fire, the little fake fire. I can't open these. And they're in their little like checkered shirts because they don't even have the wardrobe yet, and they're sitting there doing the Paul and Laura scene. And that's the thing, they're talking about Jack almost dying and all of that, and there's some of that because it's in the pilot, which is very much about this. And at the end, Michael Charles pulls her close and says, "You hear that? They're singing." And they talk about the singing stars. So we see people say we didn't go by the books. We did. We totally go by the books in the pilot, and we kept pulling things from the books into the show. And every now and then we would sneak in something that was like hugely historically accurate by accident, because a lot of the time we were just kooky actors in the 1970s in California going, "Well, that sounds good," and not really paying attention to history or the books. That's what people do in Hollywood. But that one, that there you go. We had the singing stars and the fiddle and the prairie and Jack almost drowning. That was we totally kept that in the show. So we are awesome. So this is a root beer float flavored Peep. I don't know. I mean, you all know from Peeps, right? I know some of you in Europe, Peeps are the little yellow marshmallow chickens that we eat in America. They're not really, they're kind of disgustingly sweet. But this is a root beer float flavored one. It looks like a turkey. It's going to burn. Let's see if this is any good. Yeah, it's kind of gross. It's marshmallow. It's insanely sweet. Oh, there's a root beer. It's mostly like pure sugar. It's like just shoving a handful of C&H sugar into your mouth because it's just sugar everywhere. It's like all over my hands. But it's marshmallow, and there is in fact a root beer, faint root beer taste. If you really like root beer and sugar, like if you wanted a glass of root beer with about 8 or 9 sugar cubes in it, then this is great. But no, it's kind of terrible. Ew. I'm not eating any more of those. I will eat this chocolate rabbit is good. I do have the fancy chocolate rabbit, as you saw, and the fancy chocolate chicken. They're quite good. Those are the good chocolate. So I have those. And I have like some little, chocolate covered marshmallow thingies and chocolates. Just a little basket of stuff. Little small pile of goodies. And later, okay, I'm going to make this pie. I'm doing lemon meringue pie. I'm making salmon and asparagus. And we'll put some pictures up of that later because we're all stuck in the house. I know. And it's a holiday. And people are having Passover by Zoom with their relatives and Easter. You can do Easter by Zoom. You can Zoom with the grandparents and whatnot. But it's just me and Bob and the cat, as you saw Morticia earlier, the kitty, and Sock Monkey, and we're hanging out and having Easter. But we're going to get dressed up, and we're going to set the table and get out the good dishes. Was it the set of good dishes? The one for Sunday and the one for when someone important comes to visit, which we've never even used yet. We'll do the good dishes, and we'll make fancy food with like asparagus and fancy dessert, and we'll have like a little champagne or wine, what have you. And we will have a little Easter party with our little chocolate bunnies and whatnot, and say, "It's Easter. There you go." And we're gonna have a good time. And so you can do this. You can put on your bonnet and read your Little House books and eat your chocolate bunnies, just the same, whether at home or not. So try to have a good time today. Have some fun. Call somebody, Zoom somebody, read some Little House, watch some Little House on TV. It's Easter, they're showing a few episodes, right? Don't eat too much chocolate, and probably do not eat the root beer flavored Peeps, because you won't like them. Wash your hands, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. We'll do it all again.